Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Schwartz and I'm going to be presenting on Chapter 14, which is Communications in the Promotional Mix. How do we get there? So the chapter assignment question I chose for this presentation is question number 3, which says, this chapter emphasizes the importance of keeping promotional messages simple. Review hospitality and travel promotions either at the local or national level. Find and describe at least 5 examples of promotions that use simple communications and 5 examples of ones you feel are overly complicated. How could each of the latter messages be improved to communicate more effectively? So I'm going to start with promotion and communications, and specifically the promotional techniques, which are part of the promotional mix. So promotional mix is the element of the marketing mix that focuses on advertising, personal selling, merchandising, sales promotions, public relations, and publicity. All of these work alongside each other as well as the rest of the marketing mix in order to promote services and communicate messages to customers. So with advertising, we have promotions that come in the form of an announcement or a persuasive message that's portrayed through media. They can be similar to publicity, but the defining characteristic is that it's a paid-for message that the company itself puts out rather than another company or organization. So advertising is usually aimed at making a sale, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the goal is simply to portray a positive image of the organization. The next element we have is personal selling, and this is going to be a face-to-face or phone conversation between a salesperson and a customer or prospective customer. In this situation, you're going to want a highly persuasive individual because the whole goal is to close the sale while you have the customer's attention. There's a lot of pressure on the salesperson in this case because you basically have one chance to convince the customer to buy. The sales presentation needs to be highly tailored to the individual needs of the customer in order to keep the customer's attention. People tend to be pretty defensive in the case of personal selling, so this is where communications tactics come into play. Then we have merchandising, which is in-house displays, signage, and physical products available for purchase. The major benefit of this tactic is the visual reminder that supports a company's promotional campaigns. It can reinforce messages to a customer that have already been received by the customer through another medium such as advertisements, publicity, or sales promotions. So then sales promotions are our next element, which are basically short-term opportunities that are meant to prompt a customer to buy immediately. Examples of common travel promotions are coupons, contests, and other temporary discounts. Then lastly, we have public relations and publicity, which are advertisements, which are similar to advertisements, but the main difference is that they're not paid for endorsements by the company, but rather separate companies or organizations are promoting. This is an effective promotion because customers aren't as easily turned off as they sometimes are by advertisements. This is because the messages aren't necessarily seen as a product being shoved in their face, but rather a less biased portrayal of the service with perhaps more credibility, since it's not the company themselves putting out the message. Our book describes publicity as having a way of slipping past perceptual defenses, which is a key part of effective communication. So those are the elements of the promotional mix, which are essential to the message itself, which brings us to the communication process. So this process is a part of every promotional activity. Every advertisement, merchandising decision, and sales promotion is going to make its way through the 9-step process of communications, during which time the customer will either hopefully receive the message or not receive it. So it's a very important process. First element of this 9-step chain is the source. This is the person or organization who's attempting to transmit information to the customers. The next step is encoding, which is the art of translating information into an arrangement that's going to send a message. This involves using words, pictures, colors, sounds, movements, and body language. All of these must work together in order to effectively portray a message. Then we have the message itself. So this is what the source wants to communicate through their effort in hopes that they're effective in doing, which is not always the case, as we know. Then we have the medium, which is the communication channel that the message is going to pass through. This is going to be media, internet, newspaper, even face-to-face sales pitches, fall under this category. A sales pitch would be more of a personal channel of communication, whereas media coverage is more impersonal, so each has its place in promotional activities. Next, we have the very important step of decoding. This is when we not only come in contact with the message, but we take the time to interpret it in a way that's actually meaningful to us. So we have a source who has encoded a message for us through use of a medium, but now is when we find out if the message was even received and not gone in one ear and out the other, just like the photo I included. So decoding is not something that we even get to every time as customers. Sometimes there's a message and we're aware of it, yet we don't even take the time to interpret it because it has not caught our attention in a way that motivates us to do so. We talked a lot about this in Chapter 4 when we got into perception. We talked about customers and the way they form cognitive impressions of promotions. This included the 4 perceptual processes, which were perceptual screens or filters, perceptual biases, selective retention, and closure. So those are the 4 processes that each message is filtered through in regards to reaching a customer. Let's see here. In creating promotional content, marketing managers need to be aware of how customers process information if they want to navigate their way around perceptual barriers. As I mentioned earlier, good publicity and public relations is one tactic that tends to make its way through these barriers and tends to not get filtered out along the way. And as I answer the chapter question, the perceptual processes are going to be a main guide for me and what I'm going to be using to gauge the effectiveness of a promotion in its ability to make its way past perceptual barriers. So just to wrap up the communication process, we then have noise, which is basically any content that's competing for a customer's attention in the message that's trying to be portrayed. So this is like distractions, all the other ads that we see, competition for the ad itself. Then we have the receiver, which are those who actually notice the source's message through all the noise. And then we have response, which is kind of a win in itself for promotional messages. So this is when a promotion gets noticed and holds the attention of a person long enough to actually respond to the message by either calling the number on the advertisement, going to the website, or simply making a mental note of the message to be accessed later. Then finally, we have feedback, which is when the receiver goes as far as to communicate back to the original source. This is when we find out the message was or was not interpreted by the receiver, and if it was interpreted the way that the source was originally meaning for the message to be interpreted. So that wraps up the communication process. It's a lengthy process on paper, but the intriguing thing about it is that this whole process can take place in a matter of seconds, really, or less than a second. An encoded message can be put out there, decoded, responded to, and generate feedback in the blink of an eye. A make or break moment can happen that fast for a company, and that is why it's so important for marketing managers to have insight on their target markets, to know what they're going to pay attention to and how to get them to respond in a positive way. So that brings me to my chapter question, which emphasizes keeping it simple. So we've heard of the acronym KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid. This is a design principle noted by the Navy in the 1960s and simply states that most systems work best if they're kept simple rather than made complicated. Therefore, simplicity should be a key goal in design and unnecessary complexity should be avoided. This is a principle that was not necessarily meant for marketing, but I think it's definitely applicable here. So I found an article online by Business to Community, that really reinforces what our chapter has to say about keeping communication simple. So the article had 3 main points that I liked that kind of act as a guide for marketing managers when they think about ways to develop their promotional content. So the first one is simplicity rules, which just suggests breaking down your message into digestible bits that can be absorbed little by little. Rather than including a bunch of information, just simplify it so it's easily understood and might actually be impactful that way. Number 2 is edit with a chainsaw. Basically, this just means cutting out every excessive bit and aiming for clarity above all else. It's not about trying to be wordy or clever, but just being clear and simple. And then third is differentiate, and this emphasizes altering your message based upon the needs of each specific market. This involves shifting your message when necessary to better meet your audience and what's important to them. So these three concepts, again, support what our book suggests about simplicity and the effectiveness of simple communication. So now I've kind of laid the groundwork for the promotional mix and the communication process. So we know that advertising, personal selling, merchandising, sales promotions, publicity, and public relations are all promotional activities that marketing managers use in order to communicate messages. So now we're going to look at some examples of national hospitality and travel promotions and their level of simplicity or complexity, and how each of them could be improved to better communicate more effectively. So I'm going to start with some examples of promotions that I feel use simple communications. So the first one I chose is an ad for ArizonaGuide.com, and this is a really vibrant picture of a guy jumping off a cliff, and it reads, "Your journey starts here. It starts with a leap. Let yourself go." I like this ad because it's very simple. It definitely touches on Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory in the way of self-actualization, which is all about self-discovery and the exploration and evaluation of self. The colors are also very vibrant, which captures my attention unlike a lot of other ads. The one thing I would say about this ad is that it doesn't necessarily tell you where the photo is taken. This ad might catch my attention, but if I am drawn in by the photo and the experience this person is having, I want to know exactly where they are, not just a general area. So to improve this ad and to motivate me to want to pursue the website, I might have added the name and the exact location at the bottom of the page. So the next ad over is for visitmontana.com, which is this beautiful photo of a lake and a mountain scene, which reads, "There's nothing here, nothing but a landscape so big and wide and rugged that it stretches your soul. Nothing but the corner store where the sign reads, 'If we don't have it, you don't need it.' And nothing but a million stars overhead to remind you that no one should settle for a hotel with a mere 5. All this nothing leaves more room for the unexpected to happen. Montana, you just never know." And then it ends with visitmontana.com. So this ad is definitely seeking out a niche traveler. It emphasizes adventure and the unknown and doing things differently rather than settling for a 5-star hotel. It also emphasizes a physiological need of escape, and I would say it even touches on esteem, because this ad in a way is saying it's better than staying in a nice hotel. One thing I think this ad could use is maybe adding an element of self-actualization. I think this because the ad in itself is already seeking out someone who is seeking out more out of life, and I think taking it one step further into seeking out more of themselves and adding that element of self-discovery could have taken this ad to another level. So next, I have chosen a promotion for TravelAlphas.com. So this is an ad for New York City, and it reads, "The top 10 underrated things to do in New York City." I like what this ad is saying because I think a lot of people want to seek out a more unique experience when they're traveling. However, I'm not sure the photo itself is right for this ad. As far as perceptual screens, this photo looks a lot like other photos I've seen of New York, so it doesn't really stand out to me. Research shows that we're more likely to notice and retain certain things that stand out of the norm, and for me this ad doesn't really do that. So to improve, I would suggest choosing a photo that portrays maybe one of the unique experiences that the ad is advertising for, something that looks different from the New York that we're all used to seeing. So the next promotion I have for simple communication is an ad for the Hanalei Colony Resort. It's a pretty standard photo of Hawaiian snorkeling, which again we're pretty used to seeing as far as ads for Hawaii. It goes on to describe this beautiful scene on the north shore of Kauai, and a resort that is miles away from the typical resort experience. So their motto here is unspoiled, unplugged, unforgettable. Again, this ad is seeking out the traveler that's looking for a unique experience. In my opinion, this ad is okay, but it could be improved probably by touching on the needs hierarchy a bit. So in this situation, you're talking about a place that's kind of secluded. So I would probably choose to emphasize